go. Another episode of the Creative EntreprenHER Podcast. Let's see who's coming in. Hello. Hi, Damon. How
Super duper. How are you?
are you? I'm good. I like that term, super duper. Where are you based today?
I'm in my home office in Utah.
In Utah. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for coming into the Creative EntreprenHER Podcast, where I interview leading female executives and both male and female digital and creative disruptors and entrepreneurs who share their insights and tactics and strategies that make them successful passion leaders. That's my big thing, building passion leaders. And it is part of my really cool platform that's now a year old called theCrea8ve. I'm very excited. And we've been doing a lot there with building connection and creating events and providing creative resources to light a fire in your heart and your belly and mind to achieve the absolute impossible. And so here we are today. I have a really great guest. His name is Damon D'Amore, and I'm so excited. I've known him for a little while now, through actually my husband first, Jeff Walker, through Rhymecology, and now we have been establishing our own friendship. He's been coming along to the creative coffee chats and has been involved in different ways. Now, Damon has spent more than 20 years working directly with C-suite leaders in Fortune 500 firms. And I'm going to say, I think, Damon, you're a little bit of a whisperer, like that executive whisperer. The way I've learned about you and how we talk about things. But his work focuses on psychological performance. So maybe we'll dig into a little bit of that today. Storytelling to gain stakeholder advocacy and crisis leadership. I want to know all about that. Now, the interesting thing about Damon, apart from the fact that he speaks on large stages and he's been traveling the world and dealing with all of these executives on storytelling and legacy, the key thing about Damon is his focus on women in leadership, which is why he's here on our EntreprenHER podcast today, all about resilience, mindset, and applying the lessons of entrepreneurship to corporate environments. So he goes into these big companies and deals with the top of leaders of that company, particularly, or at least he says half of his clients are female leaders in the C-suite. So that's really cool. And we'll show below here, if you're watching the podcast, you can check him out at legacymentor.co. We'll have that there. And his Instagram is Legacy Mentor Official. But let's just start with, how are you doing, Damon? What brings you to doing what you're doing? I just want to kind of break the ice, like, tell us more.
Yeah, thank you. And congrats on your 1-year anniversary. It's actually 85% of my clients over the last 9 years are women in the C-suite. I only put more than half is the terminology I use, because when I do work with men occasionally, their egos can't handle it. And they're like, oh, you're a chick coach. And it's like, yeah, like my gals are ballers. Like they're much more baller than you are. So I decided to just put the majority or quote more than half, but it's been 85% over the last 9 years. And over the last 2 years, it's been 100%. Kind of ebbs and flows, because I started working with women early on, and my business particularly is based solely on referrals. And a lot of those women in those positions, you know, they're in their own female YPO type groups or female peer mentorship groups, or if they're in Silicon Valley, they're in some book club for women, you know, some leading club. So yeah, I love what I do, and I can tell you kind of how I started that. But I have been doing this officially since 2016. But before that, I had worked one-on-one and actually built businesses for large companies in New York and London when I was on Wall Street. Started dealing directly with the C-suite when I was 22, when I was working on Wall Street, and just learned really quickly that even even senior management that were making a lot of money on Wall Street back then, they had a different worldview than the C-suite. They had different expectations on how people should interact with them on deliverables. They saw opportunities and threats differently. So I've been learning and then speaking their language for about 22 years now. And it comes in really handy because when you meet these folks, it's almost like a shorthand. Like I've had people tell me, "Oh, I knew off the bat that you were like, you get me, you're one of us." But yeah, and I've wound up developing programs specifically for women on male stakeholder engagement, and we could talk about that because a lot of the women in the C-suite at these large companies, they're in their 40s or early 50s, and a lot of their key stakeholders, board members, they're much older. You got guys in their 60s and 70s, and what women of that generation who came up in business think they're saying that should be getting engagement is not what these people are mostly hearing for a number of reasons. So I work on that a lot with my clients. The psychological performance is the first pillar of what I do to
Yeah, let's go there, because the term in of itself is very intriguing, and I'm sure that our listeners are really interested in that. What is psychological performance pertaining to the women that you're working with, and how do you work with them on that?
Sure. I have a series of my own assessments that are proprietary that I use when I take on a client, or actually before I'm going to. And there's a high degree of transparency and vulnerability because at that level, a lot of their personal past bleeds into their decision-making process, their perspective, et cetera. So at a high level, it encompasses their mindset, their capacity to be to find emotional relief when they need it, without having some other crutch. Dealing with imposter syndrome, which men and women process differently, and also confidence, being able to make decisions confidently and inspire confidence in others. And I call it owning your shit, like,
Okay.
like get your head together, and then once you have your head together, what are your most important things that you want to get done this year, which is why they hire me usually for some specific event for the storytelling for stakeholders. Portion. And then once your head's together, great. Now let's go figure out what you need to share and what the best way is to share it with those particular stakeholders, and navigating ambiguity. The crisis leadership portion started in COVID when I built a program for a specific brand and then rolled it out with others. But since COVID, I believe that we're in a constant state of crisis leadership. It's at varying degrees, but people need to learn how to operate in a crisis mindset without the scarcity, without the reactivity, being forward-leaning, being proactive, not reactive. So that's all in there. But to answer your question, hopefully a little bit more specifically, usually when I start working with a client, they say, "I'm having a problem with X in one or more of these three areas that you work in." And that's where it starts. I've had people say to me, I have worked so hard on becoming an authority on what I do, and I'm convinced that what I'm telling my stakeholders is the best thing for their interests, but people don't want to listen. They don't like me. They're not advocating for me. So it's like there's something there. And it's also, how are they seeing themselves?
I was going to say there's a lot of the outer, but there's a lot of inner, right? Of how their self-perception.
And a lot of people in those positions mistake self-validation, the capacity to self-validate, for just ego and being like, well, I'm the boss, they should advocate for me. Well, no. And whose validation are you seeking? You should have a really small amount of people that you're actually seeking external validation for. So teaching them to self-validate, teaching them to get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's funny, I think I might have shared this with you offline when we first met, but I have a small deck that I put together for referrals that come to me. Like, say you refer me a woman in leadership that you know. I'd say, "Hi, Lisa, Gilli referred you. Just so you know, these are like the traits and leadership characteristics that I see women being successful in the last decade. And a lot of them are male traditional characteristics, but women have to get comfortable adopting them and integrating them while still maintaining their feminine side." I can't tell you how many people will say, "This is offensive." Like I can't.
Offensive?
Yeah, like I can't believe that you call yourself, an advocate for women, and that Gilli worked with you. And I say, you know what? I'm sorry, and you would be great working with Jen or Christine. And I refer them out.
Right.
The women who work with me, it's almost a consistent reply, and it's the same initial reply. That PowerPoint angered me, but it's all true, and I want you to show me how to overcome this.
So they're willing to change. They're willing to accept feedback and willing to learn and grow, rather than, no, thank you, I think I'm fabulous, I don't need you.
And I tell them up front, I said, I'm not some screaming lunatic, but I'm going to be very tough. I have no tolerance for BS. And they're usually hiring me in addition because they can't get unfiltered feedback from anyone around them, because everybody around them is terrified.
Calling their shit to own their shit.
Yeah, exactly. Like the people that work for them aren't going to be upfront because they're afraid of losing their jobs. They can't go to their board and ask for feedback at that level.
No, they have to navigate on their own usually. Like they usually don't have anybody.
Yeah.
I know this. I feel this. I get you.
And so it happens over and over. I've had it last almost 3 months for one engagement until I had to do it. But there's always some moment where I say, you know what, time out. We talked about this, but now I'm calling you. Like, this is bullshit, and this is why. And usually they're like, okay, yeah, thanks. Like, I get that. And I appreciate that. I was stuck in my own 4-wall mirrored room of, the Black Tower. Sometimes it's a lot harder. Sometimes I give it to them on a Friday and they stew over it for the weekend.
Yeah.
I
want time work.
Yeah, I had somebody literally storm out of a physical meeting we were in, and like, I hired you to motivate me, not make me feel like crap. And this is and I was like, this is insane. I'm not a motivational coach. Go get Tony Robbins or Gary Vee or somebody.
Yeah, if you need anyone to prop you up, talk to your children or whatever.
In the time it took her to get from Culver City to the airport to fly back to San Fran, she had drafted an email that said, I'm so sorry. Nobody ever called me out on stuff. Will you please take me back? I was like, take you back. I didn't even cast you off. This is part of your process. So, by the way, men have their own version of this, but just with different types of ego.
Yeah, I mean, we can, oh yes, I mean, well, we'll park that for a minute. I'll put that on the parking lot.
Yeah.
I do actually want to talk a little bit about the differences, but, I do want to double click on this because learning about what you do for women and women leaders is great. And I think the misnomer of what I'm hearing you say is, we often think when we're at the beginning of our career journey, let's say we hire a coach or we're learning and we're just starting to be a leader in a company or whatever, there's a lot more room for feeling like you can learn something. Like you're a student, you want to learn, you want to grow, you go get your certifications, you get an MBA, whatever you need to do to get there, you'll follow what everyone says. But at a certain point where either you're getting older, you got kind of, I don't need this BS anymore, or you're in this role of leader where on the outside, you've gotten the props. You've got the salary and the title and the responsibility and everything's great. There's this kind of misnomer that we are any more secure or any more knowing of our role. And I think what I want to break as a misnomer is that we actually still feel, even as leaders, very similar feelings as when we started. In fact, they're completely different because now you have more pressure. You're supposed to show up in a different way. You're more responsible for things. You have to show your value more. And therefore, all that kind of inner stuff of being a leader can really be difficult. Pretend to be all together, but behind that, there's a lot going on. So I'd love to hear from you kind of the secrets of the trade. Like, what are some of the characteristics you actually do discover when you start coaching and mentoring these leaders? Is what are some of the things that might be really going on with them at that level?
Sure. And also, you're 100% right. And I've had C-suite executives at brands that you probably interact with every day or use personally as products that have said to me, I live in a constant state of fear because I can't ask anybody for advice. If I go to my board, they're going to think they hired the wrong person. If I go home and tell my husband or wife, they're going to think, you don't know what you're doing. We moved our whole family across the world for this job. Like, oh my God, like they're living in complete fear. So I call myself an external advisor. I'm an external C-suite advisor. I never use the term executive coach, but They need somebody who's not a stakeholder. I don't own their stock. I don't care what their earnings are. They already paid me up front. If they fire me, then that's on them. Like, they need somebody who's not going to be reactive or afraid to tell them, this is normal. Everybody that you see who you think is acting like a rock, they're going through the same things that you are. They're just handling it on a much more compressed time frame because they already know the tools, how to, shorten that. But nobody gets out of the fear loop forever. Nobody ends in imposter syndrome. But specifically for the women that I've worked with, the biggest skill sets that they seem to want to acquire, and sometimes they're a CMO and they're trying to get to a CEO level. Sometimes they're a CEO, but now they're dealing with M&A for the first time or whatever it might be. But taking on risk is a big one. We talked about this one-on-one. A lot of women think that I'm lucky to be in my position because so few women are. So I better not rock the boat. I better not take too much risk because if it goes wrong, it'll be like, oh,
we risk less. Yes, we risk less because we feel like we have more at stake.
So how do you get comfortable taking more risk? And that's being more confident in your decisions, having more data points for your decisions, having different perspectives before you make the decision, having a better communication strategy for all stages of those decisions. So risk taking is one. Managing ambiguity is a big one. I've literally had clients get feedback from their board and their review, and it's almost word for word on my website. You've managed ambiguity better over the past year, So how do you get comfortable in this kind of sea of fog? Finance skills is a big thing, unless they came up in finance, because I work with a lot of CMOs, a lot of women in those positions, like they got into it for the creative side. You're managing agency relationships, but you're going to be the CMO of a Fortune 500. Forget about the billions of dollars of P&L you're in charge of. There's so much other stuff outside of the creative that you're dealing with. And when you have to go to the CFO, I've had clients say they don't like me. It's like, well, do you speak their language? And it's
that's a really good point.
Yeah, so I've had so many
clients. Be data centric when you need to be.
Yeah, no matter how busy they are, their families, whatever. I've had clients take a Stanford or a Duke 10-week weekend class on how to read a shareholder letter, how to read your annual report. And they literally come back to me 6 months, a year later when they go in for their budget ask, and they say, not only did I get everything I wanted, they see if he was warm to me. He was like laughing, like he appreciated the fact that I came 2 steps towards his thing that he's passionate about. Like the first time I had an app developed as an entrepreneur, I read a couple books on UI and UX, even though I'm not a UI and UX designer. And these people who I hired were so happy that somebody even took an inch
interest
in what it is to try to make it easier for them. So that's one thing. Finance, risk-taking, managing ambiguity, seeking self-validation over external validation, and also embracing each individual battle, knowing that you're probably not going to win all of them, but you're still focused on the war. Like a lot of my clients, it's like this quarter, this product release, this crisis. Oh no, what if? There's a great article in the Wall Street Journal this week, a profile about Citibank's CEO, who's a woman, and managing 100 crises at once. And when she got the job, she didn't even announce her plan for a year, and people were furious. But she was like, I'm on the timetable of what's best for my stakeholders, not what's best for the stock price. So that's another thing. And also, another big one is learning to focus on themselves and prioritize themselves first over their team and others. And that goes all the way back to childhood stuff. Like I tell people all the time, if you're a little boy, traditionally growing up, the first toys you get, you're a knight letting a dragon, you're gonna go, get the gold or whatever. So you're gonna save everybody. You'll be a hero. Women are like, oh, baby, here's your 3 sisters. It's like, it's like, here's your dollhouse. You're going to learn to take care of these people. You're going to be a provider for these dependents. And if you do it really well, one day you'll meet a knight in shining armor, and somebody else will complete you and make you whole. It's insane. And it goes from there all the way to, I've had women in large companies tell me that their bosses thought they were giving them a compliment when they would say things like, everybody around here feels so comfortable with you because you're so motherly, like you're going to take care of them. And I'm like, dude, wake up. It's 2024. That is not a compliment. That is like one of the most horrible things you could say to a woman who, got too advanced.
We tend to, I mean, just to go there for a minute, I really like this area because it is so contentious for me as well. I have often been called the mother hen, or you take care of everybody, and the thing is that and this kind of taps into what you were saying about seeking self-validation versus external validation. There've been times when I'm an SVP and I'm still burning the candle at both ends for my stakeholders or my manager because I want to seek that validation. And I have to ask myself, why am I trying to seek that validation? There's two reasons that there's probably 10, but one of them is that kind of childhood thing you're just saying. It's kind of in our DNA, and I don't want to blanket women either, but there's a part of us where we are kind of intrinsically built to care for people. So we sort of we do that because, if we have that motherly instinct, we tend to want to care. I mean, we're, the female provider and all the stuff that goes through our head, how we've been raised of that nature, that's for sure. But two, it's this sort of also the self, there's a myriad of stuff, but the imposter syndrome, wanting to seek that validation, want to make sure that we're included, want to make sure that we're validated and have that seat at the table. And yet, you could be the SVP or even the COO or whatever, and you still got that mindset. And so when does that end? How do we break that? How do we break that?
Yeah.
Damon, how do we break that?
It never ends, but you can stop that story in your head, because when you realize you're the director of the movie playing in your head and you can narrate the story, you don't just change the narrative and say, oh, I want to change the narrative. I work with people on their whole life and career of a lifeline and a professional timeline. And it's like, here are 8 or 10 data points that any rational person would say the story you're telling yourself in your head is false. So it's not just, oh, I'm a baller, I'm this, I'm great, I was starting to stop feeling like that. It's like, I overcame this, I did this, I was the only person to do this. Like, they chose me over 80 candidates, whatever. So the data has to support a narrative for it to be a really compelling story. But to your other point, I don't want to make it seem like those are bad things that are like not bred into, but in your DNA. Use them, nurture them, but know that in a professional setting, where the line is, where you stop taking care of other people first. You're on a plane, put the mask on before you put it on your kid or whatever. But a lot of women
That's a big one. That's a big one. That's hard to take care of oneself before others. When you feel like that's what your job is to take care of others. How do you change that narrative inside yourself?
It's really hard, and you have to do it in baby steps. But a lot of women are afraid to be too tough also when they get to those positions, because they say, oh, they're going to think I'm a bitch. And it's like, well, you know what? Subconsciously, no matter how forward-leaning, woke feminist these dudes are, something's playing in the back of their head that the way they saw their grandfather talk with their grandmother, they think you're somewhat of a bitch just because you're here in the room with them. You're the only woman, or 1 of 2 out of 10, right? So set a line, like, know when it's okay to be like, oh yeah, now I'm going to show you like the dragon come out, But the best women that I work with at that level, their feedback from, their assessments from their teams, their HR stuff they do every year, their feedback are things like, I love working for Gilli. I feel heard. I feel acknowledged. I feel like my work is appreciated, but I'm a little bit scared of her. And I was like,
and that's a good balance.
I said, that's your scoring 100, right?
A little bit scared, but I get taken care of. Oh my God.
I feel good. I feel nurtured. I feel like I can talk to her about things. I feel like when, like, I had somebody who was only doing, a client who was only doing group feedback meetings. And I was like, if Jason or Jennifer were the ones that got this big win for you, you got to call them out, especially with these generations of kids, millennials and Z's. They need their gold star, their pat in the head.
That's a whole topic right there, but that'll be a different topic. Yes.
Yeah. But so the next feedback cycle, it was like, oh my God, I feel like they know what I contribute to this process, but I'm a little bit scared of them. And it's like, as you should be. Like, this isn't a picnic in my backyard. Like, we have a business to run.
We have goals to
Yeah.
to achieve. Yeah, exactly.
And some women go the complete opposite, as do a lot of men. They become complete tyrants, you know, and they think that like that's the way to do things. They saw Steve Jobs as a tyrant or some outlier. It's like, no, you need to be,
Yeah.
you need to lead with compassion. You need to make people feel valued. But at the end of the day, it's like my whole take on DEI. Like, you know, like hold on the conversation unless you want to dive into it. But there's a time and a place for multiple perspectives and multiple, you know, varying opinions and ideas. But once a decision is made, that team has to march in this direction that you, as their leader, and they have to be confident that they're following the right person, right? It's like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. I don't agree with this thing. I'm going to do it half-assed because I don't think it should succeed.
Yeah, or and then you're not holding them accountable for their role, and then it's a whole mess. And I think that's actually, I mean, I've had what you're saying. I've felt that firsthand as a manager, and you know, it doesn't matter what level we are, but like as managers, you're always kind of figuring out like your role as a manager. You want to make sure that you're nurturing your report, but at the same time, you're the one that's driving the team towards that North Star, and you have to head towards that North Star. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a manager. You'd be an individual contributor. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really important point because, you know, I've had clients who were afraid to stand up for themselves. And I tell them, you know, the people that you're looking to, the board that hires you, your CEO, whoever, that love the fact that you're this warm, fuzzy addition to the team, they want you to be a natural born killer when somebody questions your authority because they are questioning your boss's authority who hired you. And I actually had a client on the West Coast who had a problem with somebody on the East Coast. And I said, unannounced, Monday morning, you fly to New York, you walk into that office, you pin that dude up against the conference room. He was a senior VP, he wasn't C-suite, and he questioned her authority out of the email chain with everybody, you know? And I was like, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna lay into this dude and make him understand that his success is 100% at this firm is 100% reliable on you advocating for him, right? And then you're gonna give him the stick, now you're gonna give him the carrot. What do you need to be successful that I haven't obviously, you know, given you?
Right.
And I said, whatever he asks you for, say there's 10 ways that you can serve him, pick the 3 least important ways to you, you know. And this guy wanted external sponsors for something, right? So I was like, how many people can help him in your network? 8. Take the 3 least important relationships and tell him, I'm going to make these introductions. They're the 3 least important people to me that I could help you with. But if you do it without messing up and questioning my shit again, the rest will open up and we'll develop a better relationship. Oh, no, I didn't mean you to take it that way. I didn't mean to question your authority. Tell which with his legs. She goes back to the West Coast. Next day, CEO's assistant's like, he wants to see you like right now. And she's like, oh my God, I'm going to get yelled at.
What did I do? Was I bad with my report? Did I go wrong? Am I going to get fired? All that stuff.
I could quote to the letter. He said, that's exactly how you deal with men like whatever his name was.
Interesting.
You represent me when I'm not in the room with you. And for somebody to question your authority is questioning my judgment in giving you that authority. And then go back to being Mary Poppins or whatever people want to see you as. You know? But it's very important. And a lot of women are afraid to rock the boat. And it's like, don't be allergic about it. But you need to, it's like essentialism, one of my favorite philosophies that I teach my clients from Greg McCallum. You need to have a series of filters for everything in your life. What is a 90% meeting that filter to make a decision? If it's less than 90, it's an obvious no. But if it's 90 or over, you need to act, and you need to know when you're going to come across as a bitch, when you're going to use your authority, when you're going to ask for help or admit to people that you're in a space that you're not comfortable with. So all those things. I mean, I love when I get feedback. Like literally, I had somebody who went to their first board meeting after they got their new job, and the feedback was they gave me everything I asked for. I said, congratulations. And one of the board members pulled me aside and said, you're the only one we can't push around, and we haven't been able to figure out why. And I was like, because you tell them you're one of my gals, and everything you're saying isn't just like fairy dust. It's backed by concrete data that we work for months to support. Even if they don't like you, they know they're better off advocating for you and being
Yes.
on your team than somebody else.
Yep.
And
Because
that's
also
what
she's going to be honest. She's going to be upfront about it. She's not going to do any BS. Not going to try and win favors.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Like making them understand that for them to get to their promised land, for whatever reasons they're a board member or they're your CEO, because they have their own stakeholders too, they're going to be much better off and win more than they lose if they advocate for you. You don't have to go, play pickleball with them and hang out with them at barbecues, but they need to know that their best chance of getting what they want is advocating for Gilli and what she's asking for, because it's rational. She's given them all the reasons why it makes sense. But she's much better. They're much better off advocating for you than for Jason or whoever.
Yeah. And going there for a minute. So, even at the highest level, there's always a boss, whether you report to the CEO or you report to the C-suite below that. But let's say you're the CEO, you're reporting to the board, right? There's always someone you're reporting to. How have you seen leaders, specifically women, having all this backstory we kind of just talked about, handle when they are not handling? Like, let's say there's 10 things that they're supposed to handle and they're not hitting the mark, and it's like 3 or 4 things handling the rest, and they start to get picked at as to why. And it could be subliminal, like more kind of women bashing stuff, or it could be real. They are actually not achieving their results. Like, how do you coach them?
There's 100% real women bashing stuff still, like there's definite biases. I had somebody recently tell me that their peer with the same exact title in their company got a budget for coaching in my range of budget, and they didn't even get half of it. They got 0 for the year. And it's like, these people are advocating for this man to be in that position and not you. So the first thing I would ask those folks are, because it's another character trait usually at that level before they get coaching, is are they holding on to everything tightly because they're afraid that if they don't do it themselves, the board's going to think they're not capable of doing it? Like, are you effectively delegating everything that you can effectively delegate? And it's a real skill in order to empower somebody just enough to make all the tactical decisions without affecting a strategic outcome that's your outcome to dictate, right? So are you delegating? Are you giving me the whole story? Are you giving yourself the whole story? I used to joke with my therapist in LA. She's like, oh, I know every week you're giving me like 80% of the truth, and eventually the other 20% will come out as we're talking. So are you being honest with yourself, and are you communicating that to me on the board? Are you delegating effectively? And when they tasked you with those 10 things last January, and now it's December and your head's on the block, has anything changed that maybe 3 or 4 of those are no longer relevant anymore? Like, are you still chasing the same 10 wins that you should be chasing? So that basically that's how that's a lot of the times the answer is no. There's external factors, there's internal factors, there's all kinds of things that are like, you know what, that's no longer the most important metric because that ChatGPT took over some shit that we used to come up with creatively, whatever it might be.
Actually, I mean, I see that firsthand too. There's a couple of points that you just raised that I'd love to double click on. One of them is many times I have taken on work and extra work and not delegated it. And it's funny, I was having a conversation with a VP recently who does the same, just takes on the work, thinking that the more work I do, the more respect I get, right? And I've done that in the past. I've learned a lot about my time management. Like I've really learned to set my boundaries, but it's been a thing that I've had to really learn over time. Is it's not about how hard you work and how long you work. It's the value throughput. And that leads me to the second point. I'm really big on making sure that my expectations, my personal expectations, meaning how I'm supposed to perform, is very much on the same page with my management, my boss, my wherever. Like what goals they're setting for me, I want to be able to say it back to them so that we are on the same page. Because sometimes we are delivered goals, whether they're the company goals or our personal goals, and we interpret them the way we think we should, respond to them, or meet them. And it's great when they're not, it's actually harder when they're not prescribed. I don't like to be prescriptive with my reports, but when they're not prescribed, it's kind of ambiguous. Oh, well, we need to hit whatever target. So I'm going to come up with all of these ways and approaches I'm going to get there, KPIs, right? But along the way, you have to have like very kind of specific check-ins with your boss to make sure that you are always in alignment on those. Because if you deviate one bit and they're not in alignment, then you got to show them why that's a better path, which is great because they don't know everything. You want to show them that. Or otherwise, it can really derail. And I've had that in my past where I feel like I've done great. I've worked hard. I've hit my brownie points. I've hit my points, but I'm not getting the brownie points. And my boss is saying, no, you're off track. Like, where did we go off track? Have you had that scenario with your clients?
100%. And a lot of what I do, not just with storytelling for a board meeting, product release, thought leadership speech, Davos, whatever their event is, we map out their stakeholders individually. So there are some board members who are allies, some are enemies, some are on the fence, right? But it's like, what is each stakeholder, whether it's your boss, whoever, what do they really need? And how do you know that? Did you assume it? Did they tell you? Whatever it might be. And chances are, if you're a high performer or you have the capacity to be a high performer, you're putting much more work in your head and demands on what you think that deliverable needs to be. I went through this, right? When I got to Hollywood, I was like, these people are slackers. Like, I built businesses on Wall Street. Everybody's just wandering around in the Starbucks talking about the scripts or whatever. Nobody's doing anything. And and when I raised money for my
more about that. Keep going.
when I raised money for my first investors, I was like, I never raised money at that level before. So I was like Googling blog posts from, Silicon Valley people about this is how you write a board letter updates. Every month on the month, I was writing like a 4-page update about every single thing that I had done the last 30 days with their money as a steward of their capital. My biggest investor finally called me one day. He's like, dude,
Too much.
I appreciate this. Nobody else does it. You are accountable beyond belief. But once a quarter, tell me, like, we trust you. We trust you.
Too much information.
We trust you. It's too much information, right? So a lot of times it's like, plus you're seeing things on the tactical level that your boss isn't.
And they have to take it up. You have to take it up a notch for them. They can't be in the weeds with you.
They can't, and you might think it's important to have like cost to serve and these metrics and this and that, but maybe they're focused on one metric because the board put their head on a chopping block. They're like, if this isn't improved, we're going to have to look at other options. So they don't care about the other 5 things you're doing. So I always say, interview your stakeholders. I'll interview them for you if you don't want. I do that sometimes, but each stakeholder has what I call their 2.0 that they wish the world would look like if they only got what they want. And there's very specific things for the quarter, the year, whatever it might be we're working on, in order to make your general counsel, chief legal officer need this for regulatory. Like, that will make them happy. Your CMO needs this because they're having a hard time having agencies do whatever. Your CFO needs this because he's getting shit about XYZ. And it's like, every big decision you're going to make before you delegate it to your people, how many needs are you serving with those decisions? And I tell them, if you don't know what you're doing or you're afraid you're doing the wrong thing, start off with the one thing that you can do that serves multiple people's needs at once, right? If you can make the CFO, the CMO, and some board member happy doing one thing, but it may not be as important as this other thing just to make your CEO happy, do the thing that satisfies 3 stakeholders first, right? So
or not. Like, how much do we have to be spending our time trying to satisfy others? This is like a whole different thing too. Like, we spend so much time making sure that we're in the room, that we're doing our job, that everyone's pleased with our performance, and it's like, sometimes it's a little overkill. Like, but we've already got the job,
I had somebody recently, their company hired outside consultants to kind of like, assess what their team's doing. But these consultants were literally like 70 years old and were like, oh, this is what you should focus on. And the client's like, oh my God, in this world of like none of that's even relevant anymore. So I was like, your CEO pays these people a bunch of money because they respect them. They read their books in business school or some shit 30 years ago. So tell them whatever they want to hear, but keep doing what you think is most important. Because when you show up at your review at the end of the year, you're not going to have to justify what some consultant asked you to do. You're going to justify what you made the decision to do. They are empowering you as a decision maker and executor for a reason. So, there's different levels of importance, but at some point you need to say, enough is enough, and I'm
Yep.
only going to do X, Y, Z. And you got to be comfortable with that. You know, it's a lot of people, men and women, they're afraid to make a decision and stick by it because they don't want to take the responsibility if it doesn't go right. And I always credit, once I got to corporate America, like on Wall Street, when I started as a trader, at the end of every day, there was a red or a black number in your Excel sheet. It was like
Oh,
live and die by the sword, right? Like you
wow.
made money or you lost money, you're
Right.
whatever. But
Very
other
black and white, literally.
very black and white and black and red. And I had other friends on Wall Street that were like investment bankers and doing M&A deals in the 90s or whatever. And it was like, oh yeah, if this works in 6 months, we'll get. I was like, 6 months? Like I go to bed knowing if I made or lost money towards my bonus pool at the end of the year.
Mm.
So I'm used to 100% accountability. I have a mug on my thing that says like, own your shit.
Oh,
Like,
you
you know,
shit.
it's like,
I love that.
if you're going to make a decision, own it completely, you know?
Is that your next book? Own your shit.
But my next book's about the crisis leadership program that I built for Adobe C-Suite in April of 2020, and then rolled
Mm.
out to some other folks. It's about the crisis program I built for them and others that was successful, thank God, because I did it in the moment. And the fourth part of the book is about women in leadership post 2020 and how the needs of women in leadership positions have changed and their stakeholders' expectations have changed. So I
That's
expect
good. When is that coming out?
you know, I literally hit my halfway mark of about 20,000 words recently. So I'm hoping to get a draft to my wonderful editor. She's on the East Coast by the end of August, and hopefully tweaks, edits, everything by the end of the year. And hopefully it's out January, February.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, oh, there's a lot here. And actually, just to go there for crisis leadership for a minute, I'd love you to give us like a what is crisis leadership and how do you address that? And then I want to take a break and talk about something different, which I know you're prepared for too. So what is crisis leadership to you?
To me, crisis leadership is the capacity to wake up every morning, good times or bad, knowing that things are probably going to go horribly wrong, but you have enough data to believe in yourself that you're going to be okay and thinking your stakeholders are going to be okay. That's literally crisis leadership, because if you're not confident in yourself, it bleeds into everybody else and nobody's confident in you. I used to tell people when I was in Hollywood for all those years, I'd seen screenwriters go in to pitch a project and they didn't really believe in it. I was like, dude, if you don't believe in it, you're not going to sell some development
Yeah.
gal a new line to, put her. So crisis leadership to me is knowing that things are never perfect. They're probably going to go horribly wrong. You're going to be okay. And being able to move from a reactive to a proactive stance as soon as possible, and having accountability systems in place so that even sometimes it was daily during COVID, you are knowing if what you're doing is working or you need to reconsider it, right? Not just planting a flag and saying, oh, we're going to go here and, whatever. So to me, that's what it is. It's navigating a world of ambiguity in a way that you are confident in your decisions, and that confidence makes
Yes.
others want
Makes
to
others
advocate.
feel secure, I guess, too. Because I think that's, and I'm always talking about through the creative and the podcast that I do as well, and all of the programs, that there is a moment where you become a leader. It's a long moment. It's a series of becoming, but it's like when you're not a leader, that you can't do that. When you become a leader, people looking at you in the room, they're looking to you. And so how you show up now, it's like you're not just part of the herd going, yeah, you're like, oh, okay.
I'll tell you a story, and this is like nothing political about this, but 2000, I was like, I can't vote for either of these people. It's ridiculous. I thought George Bush was some Yahoo, and I had no confidence in him. And I saw him stand on the rubble in 9/11, grab a microphone, and become like a king in that moment, and a whole city rallied around it, regardless of what happened after that, mistakes,
Yeah,
whatever.
regardless of the politics.
I was
Yeah.
like, you can go back and watch the moment like a boy became a king, like in front of the world. And everybody has those moments. And the funny thing was funny to me because you would think it was obvious, but I had so many leaders calling me during March, April, May 2020 saying, my God, my CFO, my CEO, they're falling apart. They won't answer emails. They're just paralyzed. And they always seem so rock solid. I was like, dude, none of those people in the C-suite, very few of them were around for the last big global crisis in '08. They never experienced this. However they pose themselves or whatever they present themselves as, nobody's been tested. Now is the time that if you step up, you will be a god to these people and they will come to you no matter what. So, you should be the person that, regardless of your title or position, that when things go wrong, they say, we got to find out where Jilli's at with this. Like, what's she doing? What's she thinking? How's she reacting? How's she planning? So to me, that's a big part of it, and a lot of it in between big crises like COVID, or for a lot of consumer brands, summer 2020, everything that happened when they lost control of the narrative. It's in between looking at the world and saying, what are the possible levers that could get clogged up, that could create another crisis? Because after 2020, people thought, oh my God, it was 2021, we're going to be out of this. But look, supply chains totally messed up. Talent acquisition and retention, impossible. You had tech companies hiring people and giving them no jobs just to take them off the market, right? You have
I know so much going on.
Political risk, regulatory risk, wars going on. You are in a constant state of aftershocks from this earthquake 4 years ago. And you better get comfortable waking up every day being like, Jerry Jones was asked one time how he made all of his money, like staking oil, back in the day when he had like a wife and a kid at home and no money. And he was like, I'm the most comfortable person I know with ambiguity. I didn't need to know where my next mortgage payment was coming from. I knew what I was doing was right. And some people are not built for that. As one of my friends said on Jon Stewart's Daily Show back when it was on, when he was interviewed about his book, he said, some people are 911, some people call 911. You need to know.
That's exactly how, that tells it right there.
You're either good in the crisis or you're not. And for people that have never been tested, I say, what makes you uncomfortable, go do that thing and see if afterwards, if you could look yourself in the mirror and know a little bit more about who you are, you're going to be a better leader. I had things happen very young in my life that were black and white, binary life events where there was a before and after that was concrete in my life. And I know exactly how I reacted. I know who I am and who I'm not. And to this day, the people that I've married or dated or worked with or whatever, they're like, dude, one of the things I love about you is you know exactly who you are, And they said, one of them was at this Robin Hood Foundation, the big Wall Street charity thing every year. And he was like, oh, I'm in this room with all these guys that are like posing with their egos. And so some guy walked up to the table and he reminded me of you. He started talking about what he does and he didn't make up some BS. He was like, this is who I am in the world and I'm comfortable with it. And he was like, reminding me of you. And I'm like, that's a big compliment, because if people come to me and say, I've got a client with a big budget and they need help with culture or executive presence, call these other people.
Yeah, you're good at that. You know what you can't do, what you won't do, what you know that is not right for you.
These are the three things I'm great at, and I will put myself against anybody on stage next to myself and advocate for myself. But if it's not my wheelhouse, I'm not going to say it is. And a lot of people at that level, they're afraid to, especially in a crisis, say things like, I don't know, I've never had to deal with my supply chain. I'm a creative person, what do you mean we can't get X, Y, Z? So yeah,
I think it's a really, I think it's really telling, and just to kind of go there for about how we get clear with who we are, because it'll lead into something. I want to talk about music a little bit. Two things that come to mind for me, or three. One is, if we can get clear with who we are more and more, we're going to show up better as leaders, because based on what you're saying, we're showing our truth and we're showing our leadership and our style, the way following who we are, not trying to be someone else, not trying to pretending. Back at the time of 9/11, now a while ago, but still we remember it every year and we remember it. But I was trying to go to Australia, and there was like one flight, one day at the end of that week where they were letting people fly out. No one had flown internationally all that week for obvious reasons. And so I turn up at my normal scheduled flight at LAX. Couldn't drive to the thing. I had to catch a taxi, because no one could. You couldn't drive to the terminal for obvious reasons. When I got there, apparently all the airlines had told everybody, if you hadn't been able to fly out before now, you can all arrive on Friday and go home. And so there were 2 flights out to Australia. There must have been at least 10 flights worth of people there, all thinking that they could get home. And everyone was scared and wanting to get. So I go into my crisis management mode and I become like there was no evacuation plan. There was no plan. I'm like, someone's not organizing this right. Like, so I'm like project manager 101, just like, okay, if you're in first class or if you've got an actual flight, let's all line up in this line. I'm not even working for LAX. And then if you're waiting for a flight and you're on standby, this line, and people were like fainting, like, and I'm like there trying to help people like navigate the system. Like there are people who do that and people who don't. And so I've noticed about myself that I've got this kind of left brain, right brain, getting things done kind of mode. I may not know all about how to fly the plane, but I know how to wrangle the people in order to fly the plane. And that's why I tend to go in more like product or program management areas for my leadership qualities. But the other side of me is I know I'm very creative. I mean, like, and I'm really learning to not deny that part of my upbringing. And so, as a lot of people know who read my blogs, and I read my blogs and watch my podcasts, and they know that I also have a lot of fascination with music, and I had a whole career in the music industry. So segue, and I try and bring that into my work, but that's a whole different topic. Segue. I know that you were listening to some of my songs. What song do you want us to play for our commercial break here on the podcast?
I would love the Italian version of Bye.
The Italian version of Bye. That is awesome. Okay. Well, we're going to go and listen now to Bye, Such a Lonely Word, but the Italian version of Bye for Damon by Jelly Moon, which is my artist name. Here we go.
Avvicinarci, credo che possa durare per sempre e se ci proviamo noi non dovremmo dirci addio e vai è una parola sola, non dirmi bye 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 bye. Credo no, ci sia bisogno di rovinarsi, ma se te ne vai, l'amore dato mi toglierai e vai è una parola sola, non dirmi bye 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 bye. Love, darling, all the time.
It's funny because I'm Italian. I love the song, but a friend of mine in California is starting a hip hop blog for Italian music, HipHop Italia, and
Oh,
I put them in touch with Jeff because I was like, Jeff did a whole like French hip hop thing on his Spotify. I was like, you guys should do a co-blog post, get each
that's
other's fans and
awesome.
shit. Yeah.
Oh my God, that'd be great. Yeah, I was born in Italy, but grew up in Australia. And so when I recorded the English version, by Such a Lonely Word, immediately went back in, and I got a friend of mine, Marco, who translated, made sure that my wordsmithing was right because I couldn't remember how to write it all, and sung it in Italian on the same take. And it does get a lot more play. And it was on Italian radio for quite a long time. Yeah,
Really?
I got radio play at the time when I released the album Extraordinary Life. It was on, I'll tell you what was really interesting about that song. It was on the Italian version of Telecom, like on hold. It was on hold music in Italy.
That's so cool.
It's kind of funny because it goes bye, 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 bye. Like, should I hang up now? Should I hang up?
That's awesome.
It's actually kind of, I mean, I know you know this, you're very unique in that you have this perspective, not to bring up the gender, but we've been talking about the gender today, of this male perspective of women leadership. I guess I never really asked you why. Why did you choose to really, because you said you really know what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Like, why women? Why women leaders?
Initially, it wasn't, but like I said, some
Okay.
of those clients started referring me to others. And before I knew it, I had this group of women that were relying on me. And I'll tell you exactly why. So this was before COVID, and one of the women worked for a large global hospitality company, and she got laid off. And then she had both of her parents die within like 6 months. Her whole world was like torn apart. And she was trying to get back into the job market to be distracted and do her thing, travel, whatever. And I remember it was like December of that year. And she says to me, no, she's like, hey, I'm going on Christmas vacation, but I want to let you know, I got a job offer from X brand, one of the big hospitality brands. These are the terms, a lot of money, blah, 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 blah. And I was just about to write congratulations, but I kept reading and it said, but I turned it down.
Oh,
So I immediately shot an email back. I said, why'd you turn it down? She said, oh, well, because it didn't meet any of the filters that you and I, that we decided for what should be. I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, this woman's got no security of life right now, personally. And she just turned down all this money and a good job so I called the president of a beauty brand that referred me to her.
yeah,
And I said, dude, and he was like, you engender trust in people. People trust you.
yeah. I
You
follow what you say.
you have a massive responsibility now working with these people to like, they're going to listen to you. And I was like, oh, the whole holiday,
Yeah,
oh my God, this is horrible. Blah, blah, blah. And then like 2 weeks after, like after Sundance or whatever, like the middle of January, she's like, oh my God, this other leading brand, the big brand's competitor, offered me the perfect job. I just took it, blah, blah, blah. Thank you. If I would have taken the other one, I'd be miserable. And I was like, oh my God, thank God. So then I sat down and I was like, all right, like
yeah,
now, like this, I would take this task as like a Stephen Pressfield type capital P professional. There are specific differences in the women and men that I'm working with. And I got to figure out like a curriculum just for women at this level of this personality type. So I did, and it became more and more rewarding. And that's when I decided to focus on it because, years ago, 2005 and 6, I was a CrossFit coach or whatever. And I
were
prefer,
you were a CrossFit coach? I'm doing
yeah,
CrossFit. I'm so bad at it.
all the way up until 2011 when I broke my back in a car accident. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But I would co-teach out in the valley. Actually, I would co-teach on Fridays the women's class, and all these
Yeah,
guys were like, "Why are you coaching chicks?" And I was like, "Dude, because I'll tell you why. I could coach any gorilla like me to go from picking up 300 to 400 pounds, but when for months these women work on like bench pressing their weight or doing their first pull up, they're like crying. I've gotten cards like Thank you. I feel empowered like Lara Croft. I feel blah, 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 blah.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
like, it is so much more satisfying to see somebody go from 0 to 1 than like 80 to 85. And it's the same way.
I
Like,
would totally hire you as my CrossFit coach.
hey, I grew up with, one full and 2 half sisters, a single mom.
Yeah.
That even though I was resisting it, more of that heroine's journey, virgin's promise side of feminine narrative, it was seeped into me, So I have like a higher emotional intelligence, except for the 2 I chose to marry, but with the women that I work with, right? And a lot of the feedback is afterwards when I do my postmortem, why'd you hire me? One of the things is, you don't treat me like a woman. And it's like, no, just like my gals I would coach in CrossFit, like I need to not even coach you like a man. I need to coach you tougher than I would my male clients because the odds are stacked against you, And when they come out and they say things like, the board looks at me differently, the male peers in my C-suite never look at me the same now. It's like, you are empowered for life, and that's the warm, fuzzy part of what I do, and they never let anybody question their authority. I was actually with somebody I was potentially going to coach, and I used the word authority, and they were like, "Oh my God, she's a CEO," and she was like, "That's a term of the patriarchy, and it's offensive. I can't believe women embrace that term." And I was like, "You got a whole lot of therapy. I'm not a therapist to get over authority, but if you're not going to take agency and want to have authority that you are going to, impose in a positive way on your stakeholders." I don't even know how you became CEO of the company that you're at right now, because if you're like afraid to wield authority and power. So yeah, that's basically how it started. And then as I was thinking about, wow, I need to really come up with a specific curriculum, I had a former client that year. This was like 2018, maybe 19. And they said, I just went to refer you to somebody, but she went to your website and there's nothing about coaching women. And I was like, you know what?
Your branding, you started targeting your branding a little more.
Well, a little bit though, because this is like in the height of Me Too. And I would literally get on podcasts like this and have a host that was supposedly happy to see me, be like, you're a white middle-aged male from like Wall Street.
Oh my gosh. See, that's just like reverse discrimination. God, I hate that.
Like, what gives you the permission to mansplain to some woman how she should be talking to men? And I'm like, I've literally had this happen, and I'm like,
that's awful.
I'm like, look,
those women.
I've seen every personality type in the women in my life growing up. I've seen women take on a victim mindset and live with it and the consequences of that. I've seen women say enough and then shift to a positive. And I've seen women out of the gate who are like indignant like me and like, no, you can't define me or tell me what I'm doing. My one sister wanted to be a cop. She's going on ride-alongs at LAPD. And she wants to be a chef and she's doing whatever.
I think it's really disastrous when a woman that, certainly in media or in leadership starts to kind of dish this out, like you have no authority to, come on, just all full transparency, the best managers that I've had that have taught me about leadership have been men. It's not that we're here to bash either, or that to say that one is better than the other, or be able to teach us something. It's more how I, as a woman, want to learn how to show up better in all circumstances. I've had real bitches as managers too, women. It can be really, in fact, a group of women together can be harder than a group of men. So that we could go down that path too.
Last things I'll say.
I'll say that as a woman.
Yeah. When I was teaching at USC, I had a group of second-year MBAs, and I brought in the CEO of the Girl Scouts of America, a woman, Connie, and one of the women asked, she was like, what's the biggest impediment to us getting into the C-suite like you? And she said, the woman to your right and to your left, because there's a scarcity mindset. There's only so many of you, and men advocate for each other because if Jeff gets the promotion, they think they'll all be better off. But you figure that's the one position for a woman we're all messed up,
Yeah, and that goes back to all of those things that we talked about, because I've had a lot of women on my teams, especially in program management. That seems to be a lot of women go there, men too, but it's like I'm also dealing with reports that are going through the things that I might even be going through, and so there's this competition. There's no competition here, and that's because of all of the ingredients that we just talked about, of our own imposter syndromes, our own scarcity syndromes, our own lack of crisis management, our own inability to break the glass ceilings, our own, our childhood, the norms, the mansplaining and the women's splaining and all of the things that we grow up even just the tech industry being like full on, you've got to compete in the media industry and getting into big companies or rallying in a startup. Like we go through the gamut of it. So it's really, it's almost genderless here. It's like, how do we navigate this as people, and we can work better together as people, which is the fundamental truth here.
I refer people to you. Like I always say, hire a bunch of women. But at some point, if you're trying to get to that level, you're just outnumbered. You need to figure out how to get a man above you in that hierarchy to want to mentor and advocate for you and pull you up into the C-suite. You need to figure out how to communicate with these folks, because you're still going to be 20% of the boardroom or whatever it is, right? So
yes, I'm often the only person in a board meeting. Only female.
Hire me, but go hire
C-suite.
Yeah, hire me, go hire 4 other women, whatever it might be.
Which is good. There's a diversity criteria in hiring in these companies, but it's not necessarily that you can always just hire the woman, because they're sometimes not the best in their last candidates. Then, if you're finalists, you've got to go through this criteria. And sometimes I feel like, have I been hired sometimes because I'm the token woman? They need another woman. Like you get a little in your head.
I have clients that when they first have a crisis, they say, oh my God, maybe I was just a diversity hire. Maybe
it was just a diversity hire.
Like, do you know your own background? Like you're here for a reason. Get that out of your head or whatever. But yeah. I had a big brand during 2020 when everybody was locked down and they were like, oh, we can't do engagement HR stuff for our employees. It's got to be over Zoom. So they said, we have about 200 women in our leadership program. Can you talk to them on Zoom? I said, great. So they sent out my notice like, hey, our September guest is going to be Damon D'Amore. He works with these women at these levels. Blah, blah, blah. And the HR woman called me and she was like, I'm embarrassed. The amount of hate emails we got back. Why are you letting the man speak? You're supposed to be showcasing women and blah, 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 blah. And she was like, I said, look, I don't want to go with a target on my head. Like,
it's a tough crowd. I'm sorry.
So she came back to me and she said, I think I have a compromise. A number of women said it would be okay for you to be on the Zoom if the moderator and another
panel or something.
But like if you were outnumbered by women on the Zoom. And I was like, could you imagine if I ever said a woman's not allowed to speak in this meeting unless more men are speaking? It's totally crazy. But what did I do?
It's such a reverse discrimination. It's awful.
What did I do? I said, you know what? Wonderful. If there's
I know why. We know why.
Yeah. If there's one woman in 200 that I could talk to under these crazy circumstances that hears me and it helps her, great. And there's a woman who follows me on Instagram who years later, she took such detailed notes about what I said. I was talking about women in resilience, women in imposter syndrome, all these things. She all the time, she's like, I was going to my review and I was looking at your notes and this thing you said stuck with me from 4 years ago. I'm like, that's the reason I did the gig, regardless of being, spoken to like that. But it is what it is. You're going to get haters. You're going to get whatever. And it's like, fine. I said that's
but we have to tackle, that's why we have minority focus and we have to tackle the problems, right? So there is the reverse discrimination. And yes, we want to make sure the diversity. And yes, if a woman group needs a woman spokesperson, fine. But the actual essence of it is for generations, for millennia, women have had a really hard time getting heard, getting ahead, having a career, getting to vote. It's not over and it's better. And I'm not a feminist. Like I actually look, I will say, and I think this is something because we do need to wrap up. I'll say, out of all the things that I do in my life and how I show up, and I feel I'm pretty strong. I'm very ambitious, and I'm an entrepreneur, and I've gotten ahead. I've had to work really hard to where I've gotten, and I've tripped and fell. But the person that really I'm going to get mushy, the person that's always been in my back pocket, that's helped me fly, is my husband. He's like, I couldn't do what I do without him. We raise a family together. We have beautiful children. We've chosen our lifestyle together. My choices in business, his choices in business. we're together. And it's not to say that you even have to be married in this world, but like I will say for my success, I validate the strength of men and the male managers that I've had and the peers that I have. I want us all, I want us all to get along. I want us all to work well together.
Yeah, I mean, for all these reasons about things I grew up around, I can't get into them now, but like I'm better off if I have somebody in my corner that I'm building something for. And I look back when I met my second wife in LA and the insane risk I took, like draining my 401k, selling my car before I raised my, like all these things. I couldn't have done it unless I woke up every day next to somebody that was like, believe in you, baby.
Go get it.
Like
Yeah.
you like
Go
don't
do
listen
it.
to anybody else. And and you know,
Yeah.
things worked out, things didn't work out, whatever. But I look back and it's funny. I don't know if you're married to Jeff, so it's not like you're divorced, but like once I got divorced, I was like worried talking to my therapist. What if I'm not going to take enough risk going forward because
You don't have someone to lean on or
you
talk
know
to.
I could live on an acre with a dog. I don't need a 100-acre farm. I don't, like whatever. I
Then
don't
you
know.
can trust yourself. And then that's really the best piece when you can trust yourself. Going back to this full circle of leadership is when you can really trust yourself, be that person in your life to go out after something. That's
Yep.
amazing.
I wrote down what I wanted for myself. And then my therapist was like, you'll find somebody if you keep going towards that to self-actualize, you'll find the right partner for that. But comfortable being alone, comfortable self-validating, except for like I have what I call a do not disappoint list. They don't even know they're on it, but there's people in my life who, when I'm making a big decision, I look at each name on the list and I say, would they be disappointed in me or proud of me? You know,
Oh,
I'm not getting choked up. And like, so I want validation from those people who have earned the right to give me feedback and criticize me or whatever.
yeah.
But everybody else, no, not at all. You know, like
Seek no one else's. I have a saying: seek no one else's permission but your own. In those circumstances, where you just have to follow your gut and just follow through. Yeah.
somebody was like, "Don't you?" One of my favorite memes. Somebody was like, "Don't you worry about what other people think." It's like I'm the result of $14 billion, 14 billion years of cosmic evolution. I'm literally a walking thermodynamic miracle. Like I'm divine. Like I have a responsibility to myself. So I had to get to a point for self-validation where I look in the mirror and it's like, you did everything you could today for yourself, or
Yeah.
you didn't, and being okay with that. You don't hit 100 every day. But yeah, and it's teaching that to executives and leaders is hard because at some point they all want to be liked. Like they don't want to do hard things if there's an easier path to like a short-term gain. But I tell everybody the world has changed. Your stakeholders' expectations are so much higher. Your room for error is so much lower, and
Yeah.
you will get axed like that, you know?
Yeah, it's a fly by night. But that being said, you don't have to seek that approval. You just have to lead in a way. And I think just in summary, just it's following your gut. I love this psychological, what do you call it? Psychological performance and having that criteria for how you are to show up and be able to deal with everything at play, knowing that things can change, knowing that there's crises, knowing that things are never going to be perfect. It's getting back to like how you show up, just follow your gut, follow your instinct. You're not here to please everybody. You already got the job.
Yeah.
So now it's acting in that job.
There's this great like psychology / philosophy book called Restoring Pride. I can't remember the author's name right now, but it's like pride isn't some egotistical narcissistic thing. The definition of pride that they give is deserving and earning the ability to love yourself and celebrate yourself. If you're honestly assessing yourself and you deserve it, you should be proud, and other people will feed off of that pride, you know?
Yep.
So yeah, I mean,
Good.
this has been great. Thank you so much.
Been good. I'm so glad that you're able to come and
Sorry
chat
I went
with
over
me.
time.
Oh, we're fine. People are gonna love this. It's good. I was riveted. We could go on and on for hours, but I really appreciate it. Thanks for having the time for me, and
Of course.
yeah, love it.
Awesome. Well,
What are you doing next? What are you doing on the weekend? Anything that you do? You obviously don't do CrossFit anymore, but
No, I do boring old man Globo gym workouts because of my back, but I try to stay in shape. This weekend, actually, my girlfriend is a C-suite exec for an East Coast company, and she's the only remote one. So she goes to the East Coast 3 or 4 days a month, and I haven't seen her in like a week because she was on vacation with her gal friends before that. So this weekend is like watching our streaming shows, barbecuing, playing with the puppy, going for trail walks out here in Utah, catching up, doing the thing. And then next week's a short week with the 4th of July holiday.
Yeah.
And I had mentioned to her probably months ago when we met that I've never been to the Tetons. And there was a Michael Jordan Nike ad in Sports Illustrated when I was a kid in the whenever it was, 80s, that showed and mentioned the Tetons. And I was always like, I want to go there.
So beautiful. I've been.
She
so
surprised
beautiful.
me, and she got us Airbnb in the Tetons. So we're going.
Oh, fabulous. That's great. Well, look, have a great time. Thank you so much again, Damon.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you probably at the next coffee chat soon.
Awesome.
Okay, bye. Come and join us at theCrea8ve.com, CREA8ve.com, or find us on social. Or find me, Gilli Moon. See you soon.